Okay, so I hope by now it's somewhat clearer to you why the downward sloping demand curve implied that the marginal revenue is smaller than price, right? Let's now put it again in the elasticity term and see what's the implication for that. Simply because in many empirical situations, I think I mentioned that, it's easier to look at the elasticity. Now, so let's start with where we stopped in previous slide here, where you already show that the marginal revenue equal price times Q times the derivative of price with respect to Q. Now, if we want to have the elasticity, we can do it like this: multiply by P over P, basically 1. But why we want to do that? Because if you look at this, it has elasticity form already. Okay, so that is, we can first factor out a P from both terms. Inside we have 1 plus the elasticity of what? The elasticity of P with respect to Q, no? Because here the derivative of P with respect to Q. Alright? And one thing we should know is also, if you flip the numerator and the denominator of this term for each other, you get the elasticity of demand. So the E of Q with respect to P, and that means it is the inverse of the elasticity of P with respect to Q. So they are inverses of one another. Because of that, we could also write this term here is 1 as 1 plus 1 over elasticity of Q with respect to P, the elasticity of demand. No? Okay. And now we could estimate it from using this elasticity of demand. Again, if a curve or the demand curve is downward sloping, it will be like this. Now, meaning dP over dQ is negative. And because of dP over dQ is negative, the whole term here is negative, right? Because Q and P both positive. So that means E of P with respect to Q equals 1 over E of Q with respect to P, negative. Okay. And then what's next? The next thing is, because this is negative, you could plus 1 on both sides, right? So 1 plus 1 over E Q P smaller than 1 without changing the sign of the inequality, because 1 is positive, right? And you could also do further by multiply both sides by P. So P plus 1 over EQP smaller than P, right? And this is what's happening in the background, so that they could say that if the demand is downward sloping, then the elasticity of demand is negative, and because of that, marginal revenue is smaller than P. So if later in your career path, imagine you become, I don't know, agribusiness advisor or something, and you only get the elasticity of demand over here, for this similar situation, you know what to do, where to look at. The next question to ask is, what if demand is elastic? What does that mean then? Elastic demand means the elasticity will be smaller than -1. Smaller here means more negative. And that means when price increases by 1%, the demanded quantity will decrease by more than 1%. So demand reacts more responsibly to price change. We apply the same route of thinking like here. So that means, a little bit tricky, 1 over the elasticity of Q, and with respect to P will be still negative, but larger than 1, -1, sorry, -1, okay? Think about it, okay. If it is here 1 over -2, that is 0.5, and 0.5 is smaller than 0 but larger than -1, right? So the more negative the denominator gets, the less negative its inverse get, but still negative, okay? And that means we would have 1 plus 1 over elasticity of demand is larger than 0, right? But smaller than 1. For example, 1 plus 0.5 is 0.5. Sorry, minus 0.5 is 0.5, right? So it will fall in between the range of 0 and 1. So it becomes positive this term. And then we would also have, right, again, time P. For everything, 1 plus 1 over elasticity of demand with respect to P, smaller than P, right? And still larger than 0. And this is the MR. That is what's saying by the second point on, just like that the marginal revenue will be positive. And what happens if demand is so elastic? The next thing, so that is the elasticity of demand equals minus infinitive. So very, very, very far in the negative one. So in that case, you would have a demand curve like this. P, Q is a horizontal line. So in that case, you have this infinitive. So 1 over E, Q, P, because it's very, very, very large in the denominator, that would mean the whole term is 0. And again, the MR will convert to P again. So that is what's set on your slide 9. Let's continue. So I summarize what we have in the last slide when we derived also on the board. We also have like the marginal revenue as a function of P and the elasticity of demand. We also show that as long as the elasticity of demand is smaller than -1, which means demand is elastic, then the marginal revenue will be positive and it will not exceed the market price. Keep that in mind. So now remember that when profit is max, the firm will set the production output so that its marginal cost equals the marginal revenue. For that reason, we could also write marginal cost equal P times 1 plus 1 over elasticity of demand. Now, and now we could rearrange it in a way that MC equal P times 1 plus E QP over EQP, right? And that is also equivalent to P over MC equal EQP over 1 plus EQP. Just cross multiply, nothing else. Now, and this P over MC, there's a name. It's called the markup. Now, and how will the markup change? Is it a good thing or a bad thing? It's a good thing, right? Because markup shows how you get, like from P, from the price, how much you're able to sell your product relative to the extra cost or the marginal cost that you spent on producing that product. So that's a positive thing. Now, so let's see how it changed now. We will not consider the case where elasticity is larger than 1 minus 1 anymore, because then the marginal revenue is negative. If you are a firm owner, you wouldn't want to produce or sell some extra thing for a negative revenue, negative extra revenue, right? So we wouldn't consider that anymore. Now, but let's say, example, when the elasticity of demand is -2, is already smaller than -1 now, then the markup P over MC will be plugged in here, -1 over (1 minus 2). That is -2 over -1, which is 2. Now, when elasticity is -3, for example, get even further, so get more elastic, then you have the markup equals -3 over 1 minus 3, right? Equals -3 over -2, which is 1.5. So the further you go to the negative side from this benchmark of -1, your markup will decrease. So the implication here is that the more elastic the demand is, the lower the markup firm will get. Now, that's one thing. The second thing on slide 11, which I have said already now. So only when the demand elasticity is smaller than -1, meaning is elastic, then you have a positive marginal revenue. If demand elasticity is larger than -1, then MC, or marginal cost, equal MR, and it becomes negative. Like I said, have to think about that, because the marginal revenue is something extra you get from selling extra good. So you would not want to have negative marginal revenue, either marginal cost. That just mean, if they say negative marginal cost, that just mean that the firms will not be willing to sell at that price. No? So that is that. Okay, last topic of this year, short supply by a price taking firm. So now let's forget for a moment the complicated monopolist guide and focus on something probably easier to grasp, because then for the price taking firm, the market price is exactly the marginal revenue, because it has no market power in order to affect the market price. So it can sell as many products as it wishes without changing the price. That's what we talk about. So the two things is price and marginal revenue is the same. And the second thing, again and again, maximum profit occurred where marginal revenue equals marginal cost, right? And marginal revenue in this case is P. Because of that, P equals SMC. And remember the graph that I showed you on the board, where we have marginal revenue curve on the same graph with marginal cost curve. So here we could actually think about that with the marginal revenue curve being a horizontal line, constant over the range of quantity produced. Yeah, and we choose the point where marginal revenue equal marginal cost. That is that. So if that's the case, what is the profit of the price taking firm? The profit will be the difference between the price, market price, and the average short-run average cost. Why? We could write it down like profit equal P times Q, right, minus short-run cost. And short-run cost could also be written as the short-run average cost times Q, right, by the definition of average cost. So let's factor out Q. And inside we still have P minus, so SAV. right? SAC, sorry. I make a typo. C. And this is the area of this rectangle actually, because here is P minus SAC, sorry, and times the length is just the Q, right? And so long as market price above the average cost of the firm, then profit is positive. How about when price increase beyond that even? So unlike the monopolist case where price only could be increased by reducing the output quantity, here with the price taking firm, it could sell as many as it wish, right? So in that case, of course, profit would increase further, not only by the price increase, but also by the quantity increases. So in that case, if price increases, the profit will for sure be the extra profit, sorry, will for sure be positive. Let's talk about a supply curve. So now if we think simply about a supply curve, it should show how much firm is willing to sell or to produce with each level of price, market price, right? That is what we learn about a supply. However, remember that the market price in this case must equal the marginal cost. So instead of using the price, we could use the marginal cost and connecting all the points there with each level of output, and that is the short-run supply curve of the firm. And it's not the entire short-run marginal cost curve, but only the part above the minimum average variable cost. Why? I show you in a minute. But let's first finish this. For price below this minimum average variable cost, the profit of the firm is negative and is profit maximizing decision is to shut down and to produce no output. Let's look at a graph to make it easier. Okay. One thing to note about this before we go is there's a gap between the short-run average cost, the SAC, and the SAVC. What is that then? Of course, that's the fixed cost, right? So that is the short-run average variable cost. It's only part of the cost. So AVC plus SAFC. And that's why there's a gap. And the more you go to the right, meaning the more you produce, the gap got shortened or narrow. Why? Because of course, with the same amount of fixed cost, when you produce less, you attribute more to each unit you produce, right? And so the average is larger. However, as you increase your output quantity, then the average fixed cost of each unit is less. That's the intuitive. Okay, so now let's call this P0. Assume that P0 is exactly the same as the level of short-run average cost, short-run average variable cost, I'm sorry, and as its minimum level. Using the same reasoning that we used to prove that the short-run marginal cost crossed the short-run average cost at its minimum. The same thing happens for the short-run average variable cost. So at that point, because also on the short-run marginal cost curve, that's the profit maximizing output level that firm should produce at this point. And what you get is P0. Now, what you paid in this case is average variable cost is exactly the same. So your profit in this case will be 0. No, actually it is negative. Why? Because what you get is even below the average cost in total. So you still need this part to cover your fixed cost. So that is lost already. How about going further below the P0? You make extra loss on top of this loss of fixed cost, right? It's not even enough for you to pay the variable cost. So that's why as price falls in within this range. The smartest decision is to produce nothing and to incur no further loss. However, now let's imagine price is somewhere over here. Now, at this point, let's call it P1 and Q1. Okay. So at P1 and Q1, because it's P1 and you set marginal cost equal marginal revenue, I'm keep repeating that so that you don't forget why we have the short run supply curves is the SMC. There. Do you get any profit? No, because what you get is still below the average cost. Now, however, now you could already cover or pay a little bit of the fixed cost apart from covering your variable cost, the average one of cost. So if price fall in between this range, between the SAC and the SMC, in this range, anywhere, is still acceptable or is still good to produce, because then you have something to pay off the fixed cost that you had in the past. No? And above the short run average cost, the SAC, the total one, this you know already, for make profit. So of course it's good to be in that range. No? One numerical example, simple one, in case, so you know phở, the Vietnamese noodle soup, quite famous, right? Imagine I sell phở, and I sell 100 bowl per day. And at this level of sale, my fixed cost is €3 per bowl. So that is average. No? And my variable cost, which is the cost to buy noodles, veggies, the herbs, the meat, the tofu, for example, is €5 for each bowl. No? So my total average cost is SC equal 8. Of course, if I could sell for the market price equal to 9, then pi will be 8 times q, right? Here is 100, but doesn't matter. However, if I manage to sell it like for the market price only, let's say 4, then I make a loss, of course. And with this €4, it's not even enough for me to buy the ingredients for that bowl, not to mention the fixed cost. However, if I sell it for a price of 6, if the market price is 6, then I could cover, I have enough to buy the ingredients for that bowl, and I still have €1 for the fixed cost, probably the cost of the bowl itself, right? So for that reason, as long as the market price still above the short-run average variable cost, the firm will still sell something. All right, so that is that for this year. Quite heavy this week, but that is for the sake of 3 weeks next week, right? You have worked hard so far with the course, make very good progress. So I'm really happy. If I'm allowed to say, then I would also say that I'm proud of your progress. Anyhow, I wish you Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, be healthy, happy, and look forward to see you back here next year. Bye-bye.